Chapter 3, Video Game Design. We're going to cover prototyping. Video games, they don't just come about in a blink of an eye. Once they are conceptualized, there's a significant amount of back and forth adjusting before even testers see the game. And that whole back and forth is developing a prototype. And remember, when making games, and if you make players angry and have a negative experience, that can roll over into other products and other games that you create, and vice versa. So always keep in mind wanting your players to have a positive experience. But going into prototyping is the building of partial models for the purposes of testing and development. Every product that's made by humans, whether it's a video game company or an actual technology business or etc., has gone through some type of prototyping. There was an older model called Slaying the Dragon, in which products were designed to completion all the way till they were finished and then tested, and changes were made where necessary. Now, it's great that you have completed a product from start to finish, but to make basic changes, it was very difficult and inefficient, because then you'd be wiping out entire sections of code. But now prototyping has evolved into a more flexible process. Being able to assemble a working prototype of a product goes a long way towards selling a producer or a publisher on it. And here we go into concept development, which has two steps. The first being conceptualization, which clearly states a game's goals and how to achieve them. And this can have a quick mock-up that could show everything from user interface to how you connect social media. And with conceptualization, you want to research all aspects of the game in detail. You want to have all aspects of your game in detail when you conceptualize how your game is going to be assembled. And then secondly, we have documentation, which is the end result of conceptualization, where it's a concept, you create either a prototype or create what's called a GDD, or a game design document. And we'll go more into detail. So the two steps into concept development. Now there's two types of prototyping styles. There's one called the horizontal prototype, which reflects all aspects of a certain design element across the board. It really just takes one element and builds it out in full. This is your breadth prototype. Taking one part and you build it out all the way in full. Now, that's one type. The second type is a vertical prototype, which involves multiple layers of a project rather than just a single layer. This is your depth. This takes a slice of the complete final product at all levels. You explore how the different levels interact with one another. Alright, so think of horizontal prototyping being your breadth, vertical prototyping being the depth. You take a slice of all levels out of the final product. That's vertical, where horizontal, you just take one element and build that across. Okay. After considering these prototype styles, you then need to determine its classification. And there are three classifying prototypes, and you need to decide which one you would like to choose. First one being a throwaway prototype, which are short-lived prototypes that never see the light of day. They're never shown to the public. They're usually just to test out ideas and functionality. The key of this is to test functionality, see if it works, and then you just scrap it. The second type is incremental prototype, which is comprised of a stack of mini evolutionary prototypes in which you combined different prototypes together. Okay, separate prototypes are combined into one cohesive whole. All right, because you're combining different prototypes, this does take more time. So that needs to be in your mind when deciding a prototype, when developers decide prototypes. And thirdly, evolutionary prototypes, which are prototypes that are designed from the beginning to serve as an actual piece of the final product. So it's not something you're just going to throw away and check its functionality like a throwaway prototype. You're actually building this out to use in your final product. And this requires constant testing and input from players. Here we have the prototyping process and kind of what the process is. There are 6 steps. Okay, what you see in the image, an example, it was on your left was a physical paper prototype of the menu, and then in Creator how they made their menu. But they start out with this paper prototype, and they go through this 6-step process that we'll talk more about in class after watching this video, but just the entire prototyping process here. And from that, the first step in prototyping a project is you need to figure out what needs to go into it. And we have here the GDD, or the game design document, that includes what is going to be going into your product, your video game. First, need to include an overview. So how are you going to wow the market? Okay, how are you going to basically, how are you going to have people buy your game? Why are they going to? Wowing the market. Second is your competitive analysis, which includes screenshots of similar projects. Consider how your product is going to differ and what will set your game apart. You include screenshots to understand what you want to be created and kind of what works for another game and what doesn't, and how this will differ and set your game apart. You then also want to include in your GDD what genre, okay? And selecting a genre clearly defines some elements of gameplay and what players expect because you are a certain genre. And then last, your user interface, and the physical interface being your control and control sets, and then your visual interface being the menus and the visual aspect of your game, and kind of laying that all of that out, all of the 2 types of interfaces in your game design document. From there, you go into testing. And 3 types of testing. 1, you can test on live users, known as focus testing, which exposes an application to a set of standard users, just trying to gain some insight. These testers will throw at you questions that will help improve your game. Second type of testing is testing multiple versions or builds of the same product. Okay, a build is a working prototype or a version of the game. You have people test different versions that you have out. It's all the same game, same product, but just different types. And then thirdly, testing online. Many of you probably have done this. Beta testing, in which you solicitate players online to participate in an open beta, which they get early access to the game, and usually when upon finishing the beta, they give you written feedback so you can use and to include in your actual final product. So 3 different types of testing. There's also internal prototyping, in which internal prototyping is prototypes built and tested by the actual development team. You just want to make sure that if your development team is not too used to the genre that you're deciding on, that they become familiar so they know what needs to be included in that specific genre. Okay, but this is testing done by your actual development team. And then we have external prototyping, in which game designers build and test a prototype that can be shown outside of just the developmental team to test the usability, how easy is it to use, and obviously the fun factor of the title's gameplay. And what we have here is just different options of GameSalad Creator and what Creator provides. And we'll go more into detail with Creator and different tutorials in class. But the big picture, we can kind of skip this, what prototyping is that you want to keep in mind that all prototypes that you create, even if you just scrap them, they always work towards the final product. You want to have that in mind. And as you're testing versions, that will help you deliver a polished final project. And this is just an example of a prototyping of the menu and how it has evolved. So even if you scrap something, it's always helping you work towards your final goal of a finished version of a game. So chapter 3, prototyping, and I'll see you all in class.